If you like these videos, please check out my full course at www.lsat.totaltestprep.net with tons of clearly explained actual LSAT questions written by someone who's mastered test and helped others master it, and an evaluation period where you only pay if you want to continue.
Okay, so let's take a look at the uh, rules. Now, the rules are always going to be found below the scenario. So we have that down here in the lines that are highlighted in underneath the scenario that we have. So runner B is before runner A, runner C and D cannot go in third place. Those are the rules. And at this point, without looking at the rules, at this point there are 120 different combinations for the runners in spaces 1 to 5. So given how many spaces, given how many runners, there's 120 different ways of doing it. Don't worry so much about the number, there's a mathematical formula, but the point is there's a lot of different ways that you can put these runners into these places. The rules act to limit the kinds of combinations you can make. They set limits on the interactions between the movable and structural elements. So the first rule, for example, tells us that there's a limit on how runners B and A can interact. B's always got to be before A, so any diagram you make, you got to put B to the left of A. And C and D cannot go in third place. The next rule, that's a limit. That sets a limit on the interaction between those movable elements and that structural element. And the number of different diagrams that can be made are then reduced and set by the rules. That's the point of the rules. What the rules do is they give you they limit the kinds of diagrams that you can make. So we went from 120 to a lot less because we've limited the kinds of interactions we can have. What you want to do is you want to write symbols for the rules to quickly see what your constraints are, so that when you're working through the questions, when you're working on the actual, you're going through the answer choices, testing them out and all that, you're trying to make a diagram, you can quickly see whether or not the diagram you're making is one that fits within those, falls into those that can be made or not by looking at what you've symbolized. So for example, we would draw B-A. So runner B is before runner A, and you're doing it, and we'll go in a lot more detail with respect to this in the following lessons, but you're just trying to visually represent what the constraint is, or what you're going to, something that'll immediately let you know what is going to work and what is not going to work in a diagram. So B-A means that B is going to be to the left of A. C and D not equal 3 is also just immediately letting you know that you can't put C and D in the third column. So that's what you want to do. That's what the rules do, and that's how you deal with them. Now, with respect to the questions, we've got the question you highlighted. The questions follow the rules and then ask you about interaction between the sets and the rules. By follow the rules, I mean they're found underneath or they're found after the rules. And they're going to ask you about the interaction between the sets and the rules, like what is something that is going to be a consequence of the information that you're given. So questions will be about different types of arrangements that you get from the combination of the structural and movable elements. And the questions will always ask about the different possible arrangements. So they'll primarily be about what can be true or can be false, or what must be true or must be false. And we'll go once again in a lot more detail with respect to the different question types, but you're basically being asked about the logical consequences of all these interactions, what can and must be true and false, and other variations of that. The diagram. So to do the questions, you need to draw diagrams. Now I've been kind of doing that here with what I have on the side, and essentially the diagrams are very important. They collect the useful information for making the arrangements, and what you first have to do is you have to first identify all the groups of elements, all the different sets. So that's what we had done with the runners, with the runners and the places. And then you have to identify or choose one group to be the structure, and you can pick the one that is more logically a structure, one that has an inherent sense of order. And this is all, once again, something that we will spend a lot more time on with respect to the different variations that you encounter. Once again, keeping in mind that if you don't see something that is more logically a structure or that has an inherent sense of order, just pick whatever you want to work with that you feel that you'll more easily work with. In this case, we picked obviously the places as the structure, and that's what we have here. And then once you do that, your next step is to place its elements logically. So you want to list out the movable elements so you know what you're moving around. What we've got here is we've listed out the A, B, C, D, and E, and it's very important because when you list that out, that lets you know that when you that helps you out when you're going through the questions and through the answer choices, what you've already incorporated into a test diagram you're making and what else you need to put in and all that. Once again, it's going to make a lot more sense when we do these actual things, but it is important to list out what you're moving around. And then you want to draw the structural spaces for the insertion of movable elements, as I said, as we did here, or as we picked the places here, and then we chose our places to be the structure, so we drew these 5 columns. Now, this is just a particular variation. The structure won't always be in a line like that. That depends on the game type. But in this particular case, this is a common way of visually representing this sort of linear structure. Once again, we're going to go into a lot of detail with all that stuff. So you want to write out the movable, you want to write out the structural, and then finally you symbolize the rules for quick and easy reference. So that's essentially what we all did down here. We got our movable here. This is how I would want you to do it on your scratch paper when you're taking the test. You write out the A, B, C, D, and E. You would, in this case, write out columns. There's different symbols for different types of games. We'll get into that in later lessons. So you would write out the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5 columns, and then you would write out the rules. B is before A, C and D cannot be in third, and you would have that somewhere so that you would be able to work with it, as I say there, for quick and easy reference, both for the rules and for the structure and the movables, so that you know what kind of structure you're drawing and you know what you're putting into your movable. So, to quickly summarize, games involve at least 2 groups of elements, some of which can be moved and some of which serve as the structure. The rules act to limit the number of arrangements that you can make, the number of different diagrams that you can make. The questions are about those different arrangements that can arise, the logical consequences, and the best way is to work with a diagram that presents the structural elements with spaces for the movable elements, and as I also mentioned, the rules laid out so that you have quick and easy reference for them.